My ex told me, "You'll never be enough." Then he saw me at the charity gala with his boss. You know, sometimes it's not the act of leaving that destroys you. It's the single, brutal sentence that stays stuck on repeat in your head, long after the person's gone, long after the silence has settled. For me, that sentence was a heavy, cold weight. "You'll never be enough for my world." Ethan said it with such casual finality, like he was just noting the weather. He wasn't yelling, he was just stating a fact of the universe. And the worst, most agonizing part of that moment? I looked at him, standing there, perfectly dressed, and in my deepest, most vulnerable core, I believed him. We met 3.5 years before that night. It was at a crowded, dimly lit friend's birthday dinner. He was charisma personified. He made every room feel smaller when he smiled, confident in his future, polished in his manners, always with a perfectly logical answer for everything. He spoke about mergers and acquisitions and future stock options. And me, I was just Emma, trying to make ends meet. My reality was turpentine fumes, cheap instant coffee, selling my abstract canvases for whatever price I could get online, and waiting tables in the evenings just to cover the skyrocketing rent. I dreamt, no, I craved a studio with real north-facing light, instead of the flickering, depressing yellow bulb in my tiny fourth-floor walk-up. Ethan initially liked that I was different. That's what he called it, a beautiful escape from the office. He called me his little artist, and at first, the pet name sounded sweet, protective. But slowly, subtly, it started to sound diminishing. It sounded small. He'd drag me along to dinners with his burgeoning corporate circle, lawyers, developers, analysts. And every time I attempted to talk about my current work, the difficulty of capturing light, the texture of oil on linen, the story behind a color palette, he'd laugh it off. "Oh, she paints," he'd say, waving his hand, making it sound like a temporary, frivolous hobby I'd thankfully grow out of once I matured. His colleagues would smile politely, exchange a look, and quickly pivot the conversation back to the quarterly projections. At first, I told myself, "Emma, you're being too sensitive. They don't understand." But slowly, those tiny condescending remarks became deeper wounds. Little comments about how some people just aren't made for success if they don't have a plan B. About how real adult jobs come with health benefits and predictable paychecks, not paint stains and endless uncertainty. Still, I desperately loved the potential I saw in him, or maybe I loved the potential of me if he approved of me. I kept thinking if I just sold a few more pieces, if I landed one major exhibition, he'd finally see my worth. He'd be proud. Voice catches slightly, recalling the pain. The night everything shattered was a rainy Tuesday in late November. The kind of rain that sounds like drumming on the roof and makes the world feel claustrophobic. He came over directly from work, already radiating annoyance, because I'd missed a last-minute dinner with his new regional director, the one he'd been trying to impress for months. I hadn't missed it out of spite. I had been frantically trying to finish a massive commission, a complex, detailed portrait of a woman staring not at a mirror, but at her own reflection held in her hands. The image was meant to be about self-acceptance and sheer, stubborn resilience. The scent of linseed oil and my desperate hope hung thick in the air. But he didn't even glance at it. He just saw the mess, the hours I'd spent not prioritizing his corporate ladder climb. He walked into my small living room, dropping his expensive briefcase with a heavy thud, and he said, his voice cold and flat, "You live in this fantasy world, Emma. Do you really, truly think you will ever make it? That you'll ever be the kind of woman who can walk into a room and command respect?" I stood up, wiping a smear of cadmium red off my cheek. I looked him dead in the eye and said, "Yes, Ethan. I just need more time. I need you to trust the process." He let out a laugh. It wasn't amusement. It was this cold, exhausted sound of absolute defeat. He looked at me, really looked at me, not with anger, but with profound disappointment, as if I were a failed experiment. And then he delivered the line that became my prison sentence. "You'll never be enough for my world, Emma. I need stability. I need someone who understands the difference between a dream and a sustainable future." That was the first time he said my name like it was an unfortunate, inconvenient burden. I didn't cry right away. I just stood there, paralyzed, the image of that resilient woman on the canvas mocking me. I watched, frozen, as he collected the few sleek, minimalist things he kept at my place. When the door finally closed, the click of the lock sounded like a gunshot. The silence that followed was almost physical, like the entire apartment and the world I had built within it had just exhaled and collapsed at once. I sat on the cold wooden floor for hours, surrounded by my unfinished dreams, by my tools, brushes, pigments, solvents. And for the first time in my entire life, I didn't see color, just a suffocating, unending gray. The silence was the sound of a future being erased. And that's when something in me shattered beyond repair. But what I couldn't comprehend then, what I was too numb to realize, was that it was only the foundation of the old self giving way. It was the precise moment something new, something unbreakable, began to be forged. The weeks that immediately followed the breakup felt exactly like being submerged underwater. Everything sounded distant, muted, like life, vibrant and loud, kept going somewhere far above me, while I floated in a cold, lonely depth. I'd wake up in the morning, and for a fleeting, terrifying second, I'd forget he was gone. Then my eyes would land on the empty space on the counter where his expensive French press used to sit, or the absence of his clean scent, and it would hit again, a colossal wave of reality that I couldn't dodge or outrun. I completely stopped painting. At first, I rationalized it, telling myself it was a necessary short break. But the truth was far uglier. Every single brushstroke, every swirl of color, every choice of pigment brought back his voice. That constant, nagging critique that I was wasting my talent, that I was chasing a fool's errand, that no one would ever truly invest in my art. He had successfully poisoned my passion. So, instead of creating, I became a ghost in my own apartment and a voyeur online. I spent hours, endless, wasted hours, scrolling through other people's lives. Other people's perfect engagements, their spectacular European vacations, their polished corporate promotion announcements. Every picture of perceived success felt like a flashing billboard of my personal, artistic failure. My friends tried desperately to pull me out. They cooked me dinners, dragged me to movies. They said all the right, cliché things. You're better off, he didn't deserve you, you're brilliant. But their words were just noise. Because when the apartment lights finally went off, and I was alone in the quiet darkness, I could still hear his voice, magnified in the silence. "You'll never be enough for my world." Those 5 words became my absolute truth. They echoed so loudly and so persistently that the silence itself became utterly unbearable. Small, sharp exhale, a moment of deep sadness. The turning point, strangely, came around 3 a.m. one frigid January morning. I couldn't sleep, consumed by a restless, painful energy. I opened the dusty closet and found a forgotten cardboard box filled with old sketches from my college days. Rough faces of strangers I'd seen on the subway, tiny, raw glimpses of intense emotions I used to feel so freely. I sat down heavily on the floor, the cold seeping through my pajamas, and flipped through them, page by page. There was one rough drawing of a woman. Her eyes were closed, her face turned up, hair tangled and wild as if caught in a sudden wind. She looked utterly exhausted but strangely defiant. I don't know what snapped, but I started crying then, really crying for the very first time since he left. Not those delicate, cinematic tears. This was the kind of deep, guttural, heartbroken sobbing that shakes your entire body, that makes your chest ache, and leaves you breathless. I realized with a crushing clarity that I wasn't just grieving Ethan, the relationship, or the future we had planned. I was grieving the precious, fragile version of myself that had spent 3 years desperately needing his validation, his nod of approval, to feel real, to feel worthy of taking up space. I stayed there for a long time, on that cold, hard floor, surrounded by those paper ghosts of my former self, until my breathing finally slowed and the shaking stopped. When I finally looked down, I noticed that the old sketch of the wind-tangled woman had fallen into a small puddle of my own tears and snot. The ink had smeared, blurring the lines of her face completely. But somehow, in that broken, distorted mess, it looked unexpectedly and powerfully beautiful. Broken, yes, but undeniably beautiful. That was the whisper. That's when the smallest, most essential part of me finally spoke. Maybe that's what I am too. Maybe the broken parts are where the beauty hides. The next morning, I did something terrifying. I went to the window, opened the blinds wide, and stared at the large, blank canvas that had been collecting dust. I didn't reach for it for him. I didn't reach for it for fame or money. I adjusted it to see if my fingers could still hold a brush, if I could still feel color, if the artist inside me hadn't died completely. That morning felt seismically different. The air in the apartment was still heavy with memory, but it wasn't suffocating anymore. There was a razor-thin opening for light. I remember sitting by the window with a mug of coffee that went cold almost instantly, staring at the terrifyingly blank canvas. It had been nearly 3 months, a lifetime, since I'd even touched a brush with intention. I felt like a stranger to my own tools. And I didn't have a plan. I didn't have an idea. I just picked up a fat, stiff brush and started moving the paint. No reference photo. No academic sketch. Just pure, desperate, furious color. The first stroke was tentative, shaky. The second, a little stronger, a deliberate smear of ultramarine blue. By the 10th stroke, something had opened up. It wasn't about technique anymore. It was a dam breaking. Every single vibrant color I chose felt like a piece of trapped emotion violently leaving my body. The cadmium yellow for the suppressed anger, the deep crimson for the heartbreaking disappointment, the cool viridian green for the small, emerging hope. It wasn't about aiming for perfection. It was a chaotic, necessary release. By the time the winter sun dipped below the city skyline, I had something that vaguely resembled a woman, but not a polished, ideal woman. She was a figure rising from smoke and fire. Her edges were raw, her expression fierce. She wasn't graceful, she wasn't poised, but she was undeniably, fiercely alive. I posted a photograph of that painting online that very night. No caption, no hashtag. I didn't expect anything, honestly. I just had to send it somewhere, to let the world, or maybe just the universe, know that I had survived. The next morning, my phone wasn't just full of notifications. It was vibrating off the counter. Hundreds of messages, thousands of likes, comments from people I had never met in countries I'd never visited. Total strangers saying things that felt like reading my own soul. This feels like the minute I finally left. I can see the pain in her eyes, but the determination in her jaw. Thank you for painting what I couldn't find the words to say out loud. It wasn't going viral in the influencer sense. Not yet. But it was far more than I had ever hoped for. It was enough. Enough to remind me that my deepest, most honest art mattered to someone, to strangers across the globe. For the first time in months, that internal spark, the one Ethan tried to extinguish, ignited into a small, steady flame. So I kept painting. Every day, I went back to the canvas. I started a series. Portraits of women who overcame specific rejections, divorce, professional failure, profound grief. I gave them power, scars, and a fierce dignity. Sometimes I'd cry while painting, scrubbing away the old pain. Sometimes I'd laugh because the colors I chose didn't make any traditional sense, but somehow looked exactly right together. Little by little, my walls began to fill up with faces, not just my own healing, but the collective resilience of every woman I channeled. One of those paintings specifically changed everything. I named her, simply, the woman who stayed. She had tangled, messy hair and honest, tired eyes, but there was something utterly unbreakable in her expression. I painted her after finally comprehending that I had survived the worst, most soul-crushing heartbreak of my life, and I was still standing, stronger, with the paint on my fingers proving it. I posted the woman who stayed online, like the others. But that one traveled. Art blogs shared it. Small, reputable galleries in Soho reached out. Then, a highly respected curator, a name I had only ever read in magazines, messaged me directly. Your work deserves a substantial wall, Emma. It speaks. I didn't even know how to type a reply. It felt like an out-of-body experience. A few weeks later, I was standing in a legitimate downtown gallery, watching real, serious people in expensive clothing look at my paintings, not like they were amateur hobbies, but like they were important works of art that mattered. Whisper of true self-realization. And in that moment, in the soft gallery light, I realized the final, definitive truth. I didn't wish Ethan was there. I didn't need him to see it. Because this part of the story, this successful, resilient, enough version of me, was not built for him, and it certainly wasn't about him. Months blurred into a year, then nearly 2. My art didn't just grow. It exploded, almost like a force of nature healing me from the inside out. I signed with an agent. I had solo commissions, major exhibits, and interviews where I was introduced not as Ethan's girlfriend, but as Emma Reed, the artist who paints silence and resilience. One quiet Tuesday afternoon, an extremely official email popped up. It was from an enormous, international corporate entity, the Horizons Foundation. They were hosting their annual, hugely exclusive charity gala to raise money for art therapy in underfunded schools. They wanted to feature the woman who stayed as the absolute, undisputed centerpiece of their main auction. I remember reading that line 5 times, standing up, pacing my new, beautifully lit studio. It simply didn't feel like my life. The event would be held in the grandest ballroom in downtown Manhattan, the kind of towering structure I used to walk past just to stare at the windows and feel small. They offered to send a private car and, significantly, pair me with one of their executive sponsors, a famous collector of contemporary American art. I said yes, partially out of disbelief, mostly out of a quiet, burning curiosity about where this new path would lead. The night of the gala arrived. The city outside my window glowed, a billion points of light. Everything inside the car smelled like expensive perfume, fine champagne, and my own potent, bubbling nerves. My dress wasn't black this time. I chose a rich, floor-length sapphire blue that felt less like morning and more like deep, unstoppable water. It wasn't extravagant, but it felt like the most powerful armor I'd ever worn. When the driver opened the door at the hotel entrance, flashes from a dozen photographers painted the marble in dizzying bursts of light. My sponsor, Mr. Sterling, a silver-haired, tall, and immensely powerful man in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, offered his arm. He smiled and said, "Tonight, you're the reason we are here, Ms. Reed. Ready to face the music?" I took a final, steadying breath, gripped his arm, and nodded. "As ready as I'll ever be, Mr. Sterling." Inside, the ballroom shimmered, chandeliers that weighed a ton, gold velvet curtains, the soft, sophisticated sound of violins from a hidden orchestra. The room was a dizzying constellation of wealth and power. And then, the static noise of the crowd seemed to thin. I heard a familiar voice nearby, a cadence I hadn't truly heard in years. My eyes followed the sound, past 2 ladies in designer gowns, and there he was, Ethan. He looked exactly the same, yet utterly alien. The same perfectly confident posture, the same expensive, conservative suit. But his expression when he saw me, that was a masterpiece of total, agonizing shock. Our eyes met across the crowded room for what felt like an eternity. He was standing near a pillar, holding a glass of scotch. He froze completely. The glass in his hand stopped moving toward his mouth. Then, the sickening, gut-wrenching realization of who I was, where I was, and who I was standing with spread across his face like a slow-motion wave of pure, unadulterated panic. His jaw actually went slack. Before I could process the sudden, jarring contact, Mr. Sterling, my date and host, placed a heavy, proprietary hand directly on my bare shoulder. He gestured casually toward Ethan, who was now visibly attempting to disappear into the pillar. He said, with a quiet, authoritative finality that made the corporate hierarchy painfully clear. I see you've spotted Ethan. He works under me. Third floor accounting team. Under him. The words were a bell tolling. My chest tightened, not with pain, but with the sudden, sharp clarity of the universe correcting itself. Ethan's boss then turned back toward him, his smile wide and proud, introducing me to his employee, the man who had abandoned me. Ethan, this is Emma Reed, the extraordinary artist everyone in this room, from the board to the collectors, is talking about tonight. For a heartbeat, the room went dead silent around us. No violins, no chatter, just the thick, overwhelming, intoxicating silence of a public confrontation. I held my head high, fixed a polite, almost pitying smile on my face, extended my hand, which was perfectly steady, and said, my voice smooth as silk, "It is nice to see you again, Ethan." He didn't take my hand immediately. He looked down at it, then back up at my face, searching for the small, defeated artist he remembered. When he finally did take it, his palm was ice cold and damp with nerves. He could only manage a barely audible, "Emma." As the evening wore on, I could feel his eyes, those same eyes that once looked at me with bored pity, now following me with a horrified, disbelieving intensity. People kept flocking to me, CEOs, philanthropists, respected critics, to congratulate me, to ask about my process, my inspiration. Each time someone whispered, "Your work is transcendent," or "The emotion is extraordinary," I could see him in the background, shrinking, his shoulders hunching a little more, becoming utterly, miserably small. I didn't feel cheap, juvenile revenge. I felt something far more powerful: distance. I was standing on the other side of a chasm, the side of life he had confidently declared I would never, could never reach. At the climax of the night, my painting, The Woman Who Stayed, sold in a feverish bidding war for more money than I used to make in 5 years. When the applause exploded and washed over the ballroom, I glanced directly toward Ethan. He wasn't clapping. He just stood there, silent, utterly small, and devastatingly forgettable. That was the moment I realized I didn't need him to apologize. I didn't need his recognition. I had already written my own closure, one defiant brushstroke at a time. I left the gala not with the crowd, but quietly, slipping out just after the final applause. I thanked Mr. Sterling, declined the offer of the chauffeured ride, and insisted on walking. I needed the cold, hard reality of the city night air and the anonymous sounds of the traffic to remind me that this incredible, almost cinematic moment was real. That I was real. As I walked, the sapphire blue silk of my dress catching the neon glow of the streetlights, I kept replaying the scene. That terrifying, exhilarating moment our eyes met. What did I feel in that heartbeat? Was it the triumph of a final? Perfect, I told you so? A little, perhaps, the basic human satisfaction of vindication. But mostly, I felt a vast, encompassing peace. A strange, profound feeling of quiet gratitude. The revenge fantasy I had subconsciously nursed for 2 years, the one where I imagined him seeing me, begging for my forgiveness, realizing his catastrophic mistake, it didn't just fade, it disintegrated into dust. It had always been a cheap fantasy created by a raw, open wound. And that wound, thanks to the persistent, messy work of painting, was now sealed over and strongly scarred. He wasn't a powerful, threatening figure anymore. He wasn't even a villain. He was just a man who, because of his own limitations, had felt entitled to define my potential. He simply lacked the vision, the fundamental artistic sight, to see who I was becoming. And that lack, that limitation, was his problem, his cage, not mine. I stopped on a pedestrian bridge overlooking the deep black ribbon of the river. The city lights were like scattered, dazzling gold dust on a black velvet cloth. And standing there, alone, I finally understood the absolute truth about the phrase that had stalked me for years. "You'll never be enough for my world." He was precisely right. I was never going to be enough for his world. His world was small, safe, rigidly defined by organizational charts, corporate titles, and quarterly bonuses. It was a world that prioritized predictability over passion. It was a box. My world was messy, volatile, terrifying, and vast. It was the smell of turpentine and late nights. It was risk and glorious failure and deep, unsettling emotion poured onto canvas. My world was a place where a woman with paint-stained fingers could stand next to the chairman of a global company and naturally command the room's attention, not because of who she was dating, but because of the sheer, uncompromising power of what she created. I wasn't meant to fit into a structure. I was meant to shatter it and build my own, a cathedral made of light and color. A quiet, firm tone for the final realization. I realized the greatest victory that night wasn't the seven-figure price tag on my painting or the look of ruin on Ethan's face. The greatest victory was the woman standing on that bridge. She didn't need a diamond ring or a promotion to validate her existence. She needed a paintbrush, a canvas, and the absolute, unwavering certainty that her voice, her unique story, her art, was valuable beyond any corporate metric. I took the deepest, most expansive breath I'd taken all night. The cold air stung my lungs, but it was exhilarating. I smiled, a real, genuine, joyful smile that reached the deepest parts of my soul. The sentence that threatened to destroy me was, in the end, the sentence that ruthlessly saved me. It gave me the final, necessary push to leave a life where I was shrinking and step into a life where I could finally grow into my own magnificent, terrifying self. And as I walked away from that bridge and away from the ghost of our past, I finally allowed Ethan's voice to fade entirely, dissolving into the roar of the city, never to be heard again. I was enough. I was more than enough. I was the woman who stayed,